Hey everyone, it's Sevy. Fontaine's main star and diva Furina is finally debuting as a playable character, and she's ready to spice up Genshin's meta. As a much-awaited unit, I'm sure many of you are eager to discover her true potential. To guide you through it, we'll be discussing her kit and talents, constellations, best artifact and weapon builds, and team templates. However, since there's a lot to talk about regarding her performance and synergies in many different teams, I plan to release follow-up videos that will discuss her team comps in much more detail. But don't worry, as I'll still discuss some fundamental tips about her team building in this video. Anyway, there's a lot to learn about her, so
let the show begin!
Furina is an HP scaling hydro buffer, damage dealer, hydro applicator, and healer, which is quite the stacked kit for one unit. The most unique thing about her playstyle is her HP draining ability, which works alongside her buffing utility, and this introduces interesting new considerations for team building and synergies. Let's take a look at her kit and talents to see how she works. Furina's normal attacks are nothing special and aren't meant to do much damage since they're still attack scaling and have no innate hydro infusion, but they are the source of her arc attacks, which deals small Numa or Usia aligned hydro damage with a 6-second cooldown. By default, her arc alignment is Usia, but if you use her charged attack, this switches her alignment. As an easy visual indicator, her Usia and Numa states correspond to her dark and light outfits respectively, but more importantly, her current alignment also determines what her skill does. Let's start with her skill's Usia version. Casting it deals initial hydro damage and summons 3 Salon Solitaire guests, or as I'll mostly call them, her pets: the Octopus Usher, the Seahorse Cheval Marang, and the Crabaletta. These will follow you around in open exploration and attack nearby enemies, prioritizing the enemy you're currently targeting. They last for 30 seconds, but the skill cooldown is only 20 seconds, which makes it easy to achieve a 100% uptime for these pets. Each Salon member has their own distinct attack interval, AoE, and damage multiplier based on Furina's max HP. The Salon members also each have their own ICD, meaning they apply hydro individually at separate intervals. The Seahorse and Octopus apply hydro every other hit, while the Crab applies hydro every hit. As such, her total hydro application on a single target isn't at consistent intervals like most abilities are. Sometimes you'll get 2 instances of hydro in quick succession, while other times you'll get hydro apps in wider intervals. It's not as fast as someone like Xingqiu, but Furina's hydro application still has great consistency and duration, especially since it can have a 100% uptime. We'll get to the implications of her hydro application more when discussing her teams. Regarding her particle generation, as her Salon members hit enemies, they will generate 1 hydro particle about every 3 seconds, resulting in around 6 to 7 particles in a 20-ish second rotation. Furina will be off-field while catching most of those though. Now, her skill is also where her HP draining mechanic kicks in. Every time they attack, the Salon members will consume a certain HP percentage of all allies that are above 50% HP. The Salon members' damage is also increased based on your allies' HP, and the more allies you have above 50% HP, the more damage they will deal. These Salon members deal a considerable amount of damage, which incentivizes you to maximize this damage increase by keeping your party members above 50% HP as much as possible. Combined with Furina's HP draining though, this means that a healer teammate will be necessary to ensure your allies are healthy and that her pets can maximize their damage. This is going to be her default and most used skill mode and is basically her main damage dealing talent. Now, when aligned with Numa, Furina's skill summons the Singer of Many Waters, which heals the active character based on Furina's max HP. It doesn't deal damage, apply hydro, or generate particles, so this version of her skill isn't the one you'll generally use in combat, but it does make for a very convenient portable healing turret. If Furina changes her alignment while her skill is active, her skill will change accordingly in real time and inherit the remaining duration. And while either version is active, Furina can walk on water, which is pretty great for more convenient open world traversal. An interesting consequence of her skill's HP mechanic is that she can now enable any equipment that needs a consistent HP increase-decrease mechanic to trigger, such as the Marechaussee Hunter set and recent Fontaine 5-star weapons. This is generally an issue that holds back the potential of those equipment on most characters, but if you have Furina on the team, those effects are now easily accessible by anyone. Of course, there is a bigger purpose for Furina's HP drain, and that's to empower her team-wide damage buff. When she casts her burst, she deals an instance of AoE hydro damage, then makes all your party members enter the universal revelry state. In this state, when a party member's HP increases or decreases by 1%, it will generate 1 fanfare stack, which can reach a maximum of 300 fanfare stacks at at C0. This is considered per party member, so fanfare stack accumulation will be much faster as multiple party members' HPs are changing. You can tell that it's stacking higher when you see the silhouettes of her audience pop up around the edge of the screen, and at full stacks, there's a dazzling animation effect played. These fanfare stacks provide a team-wide damage bonus and incoming healing bonus buff, and the buffs per stack scale with Furina's talent level. For reference, at talent level 10, every 1% HP change is equivalent to 0.25% damage bonus and 0.1% incoming healing bonus, so that can reach up to 75% damage bonus and 30% incoming healing bonus at max stacks. By default, Furina's skill drain will allow you to keep getting fanfare stacks as long as your allies are above 50%. There are other ways to gain stacks, such as enemy damage, self-damage, or self-healing abilities like that of Nivelette or Risley. But more importantly, dedicated healers are a fundamental part of Furina's comps, which will be discussed more later on. If you're not managing your character's HP well enough, your stack accumulation rate will be affected. It's definitely a core part of her kit that showcases Fontaine's emphasis on HP mechanics. When the burst duration ends, the accumulated stacks are also cleared. So when you cast your burst again, you have to reaccumulate the fanfare stacks starting from 0. Remember that these stacks do have a ramp-up time depending on how fast your HP changes. This means the average amount of fanfare stacks you'll have isn't going to be the maximum. Note as well that the damage bonus she provides doesn't buff transformative reactions like swirl or bloom-based reactions, since those have separate reaction modifiers, but it will buff amplifying and additive reactions, which are vaporize, melt, aggravate, and spread. Moving on to her Ascension talents, with Furina's Ascension 1 passive, when the active character gets overhealed by someone other than Furina, Furina will heal all party members for 2% of their max HP once every 2 seconds within the next 4 seconds. This is basically a way to help get fanfare stacks faster and boost your team's survivability, whether you're using single target or team-wide healing abilities. In relation to her skill, Furina's Ascension 4 passive gives extra bonuses to her skill based on every 1000 max HP. It can reach up to 28% damage bonus to her Salon members and up to 16% healing interval decrease for her singer, so she'll need 40,000 HP to reach the cap. Then Furina's Exploration passive reduces Xenochromatic Fontamare Aberrant ability cooldowns by 30%, a quality of life buff for your underwater combat and exploration. For her talent leveling priority, level up both her burst for bigger buffs and her skill for more personal damage. Save your materials and don't level up her normal attacks anymore. To recap, let's list down some notable aspects and pros and cons of Furina's kit. She has solid 100% Hydro application uptime, great damage output, a huge team-wide damage bonus buff, and as a Hydro unit, she works in so many team templates. While her kit's function is clear and inherently synergistic, it's also the first of its kind, introducing refreshing new synergies to discover, especially for healers. And seeing as how Fontaine characters and equipment have thus far come with mechanics based on HP changes, it seems quite apropos that Furina is enabling that mechanic for any character and adding extra buffs and damage on top of it. Her HP drain is a double-edged sword, of course, as this locks her teams into having reliable healers, and for some, they may feel a bit uncomfortable seeing their HP continuously draining alongside taking enemy damage. Thankfully, we have a good roster of healers who can compensate for this, and no doubt we'll have more down the road. Moving on to Constellations, Furina's kit and functions are entirely complete at C0, and in my opinion, there's absolutely no need to be pressured to pull for her cons. Still, let's see what her Constellations add for those who really want to invest in her. C1 immediately generates 150 fanfare stacks upon casting Furina's burst, and its limit is increased by 100 for a total of 400 stacks maximum. This basically means you don't start from 0 fanfare stacks anymore and raises the floor and ceiling of her party-wide damage buff. C2 greatly increases the HP percent change to fanfare stack ratio, making your fanfare buffs ramp up even faster. Additionally, if you overcap on fanfare stacks, those extra stacks will increase Furina's max HP up to 140%, which can increase her personal DPS by a huge amount. This builds on her previous constellation very nicely and improves both her buffing and damage capabilities. C3 increases her burst level by 3, and since her fanfare buffs scale well with talent levels, this constellation boosts overall team DPS. C4 is a quality of life constellation that helps with Furina's energy needs. When either a Salon member hits an opponent or the singer heals a party member, Furina restores 4 energy with a cooldown of 5 seconds. Since Furina can tend to be energy hungry in certain teams, this is a very helpful constellation to mitigate those ER needs. In general, it can reduce her ER target by around 10 to 20%. C5 increases Furina's skill level by 3, which boosts her pet's damage, and C6, I think, holds the record for the longest constellation description, so let's break it down. After casting her skill, Furina's auto attacks are infused with Hydro, and their damage is increased by an 18% of Furina's max HP, so they're finally HP scaling as well. This can last for either up to 10 10 seconds, or for a total of 6 hits, whichever comes first. Her auto attacks also get extra effects depending on her alignment. When Usia aligned, all nearby characters in the party will be healed by 4% of Furina's max HP every second for a duration of 2.9 seconds, but triggering this effect again will extend its duration. This basically removes the need for a dedicated team healer since Furina becomes a full party healer. Then, when Numa aligned, the damage of Furina's sword attacks will get further increased by 25% of her max HP. When those attacks hit an enemy, all party members will consume 1% of their HP. It essentially buffs her on-field damage, and since her pets aren't active during her Numa state, she at least keeps the HP drain going with her sword attacks. For those willing to throw more Primo Gems her way, C2 is Furina's best stopping point since it's her biggest early boost to her support utilities and personal damage. Now that we understand Furina's kit, we can move on to her build, starting with her stats. The first important aspect with Furina's build is determining how much energy recharge she needs. Since her burst is such a key part of buffing your entire team's damage, it's essential for her to burst every rotation. In teams where she is the only Hydro unit, her ER target will be around 180 to 200%, with the exact amount further dependent on your team's particle generation, enemies, etc. In teams where she has a Hydro teammate, her energy target will range around 160% ER, and with 2 Hydro teammates, that can go down further to around 130%. In cases where she has high energy needs, this makes ER stats have greater value, whether they're from her artifact stats or weapons, since meeting that ER target will be very important for maintaining your team's rotation and DPS. But as her ER target decreases, then you can reallocate more towards offensive stats like HP and crit from her artifacts or weapons. So for artifact main stats, her sands can either be HP or ER depending on how much more ER she needs in your particular scenario. Her goblet will generally favor HP since she can already stack a lot of damage bonuses from her own passives, artifact set, and other buff sources. Still, a Hydro damage goblet can be competitive, and substack quality is nonetheless important to consider. For her circlet, you generally want crit rate or crit damage, whichever helps you achieve a good crit ratio, but an HP circlet is also viable if it has much better substats. For substats, look for ER as needed, then HP and crit stats. Then for Furina's artifact sets, she has an easy, clear-cut best in slot, which is the 4-piece golden troop, as it provides a total of 70% skill damage bonus while she's off-field, and her skill is her main damage source anyway. It's also great that since Furina enables using the Marishose set on many other DPS units, farming its domain becomes much more resin efficient. If you haven't farmed up a full golden troop set, then you can temporarily go with 2-piece combos of HP, golden troop, Hydro, or ER sets if you still need to meet her ER target. These can at least give you more flexibility to focus on better quality substats. Using the 4-piece Tenacity of the Millilith is also an okay temporary alternative if she's comped with attack scaling teammates. Note that Marishose Hunter needs the user to be on-field to get the stacks, so it'll only be viable on Furina if she's in an on-field playstyle, which generally isn't recommended, at least until you get her C6 or if you come up with an unconventional setup. For Furina's weapon options, there are 3 main types of weapons to consider: ER, HP, and crit weapons. Again, you have to take her ER needs into heavy consideration here, as her buffing value comes from her burst. Since Furina is also HP scaling, base attack and attack bonuses won't matter. For her main ER weapons, we have 3 top picks. The Festering Desire is a very old weapon from version 1.2, so many players won't have it unfortunately. But if you do, it's generally her best 4-star weapon and very competitive even versus most other 5-star weapons, thanks to its high ER substat and the damage and crit rate bonuses for her skill. Pretty impressive for an old free event weapon. Otherwise, there's the Fleuve Cendre Ferryman, which also gives a skill crit rate bonus and a lot of ER from its substat and passive effect. However, you'll have to do quite a bit of fishing for the copy and refinements, so that's up to your patience. And as always, there's the Favonius Sword, which gives a huge ER substat and will help battery teammates by generating additional particles. If she's comped with energy-hungry teammates, this will be a good pick for ironing out your energy issues. However, this might already be in use by another character, especially since other support units really like this too. If your Furina still needs a lot of ER to achieve a consistently smooth rotation, then these ER weapons have a lot of value, especially the Festering Desire, which gives both ER and damage-related buffs. But if Furina's in a team or scenario where she has lower ER needs, then these following HP and crit weapons will pull ahead a bit more. For HP substat swords, there are only 2 options. The Key of Kajni suit gives a ton of HP and a team-wide EM buff, which is good for reaction damage teams like Dendro and Vaporized comps, though make sure you let her stack the buffs before switching out, since the stacks don't activate if the user is off-field. The Dockhand's Assistant is the other HP sword from Fontaine. While it's lower in the rankings, even versus the free-to-play ER weapons, it's still viable if you have it, and the energy passive is nice at high refinements. Then for her main crit swords, her signature Splendor of Tranquil Waters is her overall best in slot, as it gives a huge crit damage stat and stacking skill damage and HP bonuses, classes. However, given that it's running with a Jade Fall Splendor, which is a very niche catalyst, and the damage difference versus other more accessible weapons isn't as large for a 5-star weapon, pulling on the weapon banner for it might not be good value for those with limited primos, so think very hard if this is worth the risk. Another good crit stat stick is the Primordial Jade Cutter, which gives a huge crit rate stat instead, while also having an HP bonus passive. Now, you might also be eyeing the BP Sword Wolf Fang, which is a decent weapon as well, but if you're not aware, the stacking crit rate bonus passive does not trigger if the user is off-field. As such, if you're using this, try to ensure you can give Furina enough on-field time to stack and refresh its passive. Other crit weapons like Mistsplitter, Lo-Fi, Haran, etc. are all viable, so you can certainly use them as stat sticks if they're what you have, though they're not as recommended, especially when their passives don't complement Furina as well. On paper, they can end up performing about the same range as Festering or Fleuve. Crit weapons in general are also better in lower ER scenarios and can be harder to work with when she needs to build a lot of ER. Finally, we're down to Furina's team comps. Like I said, I plan to make follow-up videos with more in-depth discussions about her different teams, which will also allow me to cover more about her synergy with specific units and team templates. For now, let's just try to quickly summarize some general notes, starting with healers. Again, a huge consideration with Furina's team building is having a capable healer. Her pets will drain your teammates' HP on top of your units taking damage from enemies, and they want your teammates to stay over 50% HP to boost their damage, so healing will help her damage output and your team's overall survivability on top of enabling better fanfare stack generation. Among the different healers we have, they can generally be categorized as either single target by only healing the active character on the field, or AoE/party-wide healers with additional on-field healing utility. As you can imagine, these AoE healers are generally much more comfortable to work with. There are those that are quite easy to fit into rotations since they don't need much field time to activate their full party heals like Jean, Baiju, Charlotte, and the like. Meanwhile, there are those that can do AoE healing but require field time to do it. These would be better suited for quick swap teams like Kokomi or Yao Yao, or they could take on the role of a non-field DPS or driver like Noelle or Chi-Chi. Then there are the purely single target healers like Bennett and Kuki. It's much trickier maximizing Furina's fanfare stacks with them since they're only healing the on-field character as Furina drains the entire party's HP. However, it's not impossible to use them, especially when they bring really good utilities to your team, like Bennett's huge attack buff and Kuki as a Hyper Bloom trigger. Furina has her A1 passive to generate some full party healing if you overheal the active character, so that's one way to get more fanfare with them. Another way is by distributing their healing to multiple party members, which requires some rotation management. Healing bonus circlets and buffs will be a big help since you now want reliably strong healers, and Furina herself will naturally come with a lot of HP to heal back up. At least at this point in the game, we have a lot of healer characters to choose from, so it's mostly up to what you have available and the team comps you're going for. So let's also summarize Furina's main team templates, which are a lot thanks to her being a Hydro unit. For vaporized teams with Furina, there's a lot of variation regarding how well her Hydro application can keep up with different Pyro DPSs for a reverse vaporized team. Some Pyro units can have more controlled Pyro application like Diluc or Yoimiya, which makes Furina as your solo Hydro applicator a viable route. But some Pyro units have faster application like Hu Tao, which means that you'll most likely want another source of Hydro application if you don't want Pyro to overtake the Hydro aura. In a double Hydro setup, correctly swirling Pyro can be a challenge for VV equipped units, but at least in that case, swirling Hydro can still result in good overall damage output, like when you have Yelan and Furina in the same team anyway who can contribute a lot of damage. On the other hand, a forward vaporized team is possible as well, where you're trying to make Furina trigger vaporize instead, although this will need faster Pyro application, especially since Hydro gets rid of the Pyro aura faster. Moving on, Furina can enable good freeze uptime in a team alongside a Cryo, plus another Cryo or Hydro unit, and a flex slot usually filled in by an Anemo. Grouping frozen enemies will also be very helpful since her pet's attacks have some limited AoE. Keeping enemies frozen will also limit how much damage they can deal to you, which lets you have more control over your HP loss. As a special mention, Charlotte is rated up in Furina's banner, so if you manage to pull her, she consolidates the role of off-field cryo application and team-wide healing pretty well in a freeze comp. I should have her guide up soon, or by the time you're already watching this video, so check that out if you're interested in building her. Furina also works in a taser template comped with at least one Electro unit, another Hydro or Electro, plus a flex slot that is again usually filled by an Anemo unit. Since Furina isn't a good driver here, you'd ideally want an Electro, Hydro, or even Anemo teammate that can effectively drive the team. If you want to submerge the battlefield, you can build a mono Hydro team with our variety of on-field and off-field Hydro units. With more Hydro teammates to generate particles, Furina can aim for a lower ER stat, making more room for more HP and crit stats to boost her damage. Now for Dendro teams. In a Hyper Bloom team, which relies on consistent core generation from Dendro and Hydro application, Furina's solo Hydro application application may not generate cores as quickly or consistently as, say, Xingqiu's, but it can still be sufficient in many cases. Additionally, since her damage bonus does not affect transformative reactions, her damage buff is less potent in teams where the majority of the team's damage comes from bloom-type reactions like this. With a good Dendro applicator, you can pair Furina with another Hydro unit for more Hydro app, or a Cryo unit to freeze enemies, which also helps in core generation while crowd controlling them. The same goes for Burgeon teams, where you want to prevent burning, so having a different element like Electro or Cryo that weakens the Pyro aura can work as well. However, her more controlled Hydro application can be advantageous for quick bloom teams. Her Hydro app will not get rid of quicken auras that fast, and higher quicken uptime on enemies means that you can do more aggravate or spread reactions, which also get buffed by Furina's damage bonus buff, so that's pretty good synergy for such Dendro and Electro DPSs like Alhaitham, Nahida, Fischl, Yae, and so on. Then, if you're considering Furina in a Nilou bloom team, the obvious hurdle there is ensuring that you can survive both the self-damage of Nilou's bountiful cores and Furina's HP drain. And since Furina and Nilou already take up the 2 Hydro slots, you'll want to look to your Dendro units for your healing needs, which are Baizhu, Yao Yao, or a prototype Amber Nahida. This makes your team options more restrictive than just using another Hydro unit who may have better or more comfortable synergy in Nilou's team. Outside of those team templates, Furina can just be a general support for your hyper carries, whether that's recent Fontaine releases like Nivelette or Wriothesley, Animo carries like Wanderer or Xiao, OGs like Noelle and Klee, and many more. As long as you have sufficient healing in the team to keep up with Furina, she'll do very well in buffing your team's damage. These were just general overviews, so for more in-depth coverage that goes into more detail about character interactions and elemental synergies, stay tuned for the next Furina team's video. As long as you understand how to work around her mechanics and have the teams to accommodate it, then you'll have a lot of fun playing her. If you're also a fairly recent player who needs to build up their Hydro lineup, I think Furina will have a lot of pull value. It's very likely we'll get more units or equipment throughout the Fontaine patch that have HP-related mechanics that will synergize with Furina, so she'll get even more value when such units or equipment release. Of course, she is by no means a must-pull, as we have very good Hydro units already that also combine support and damage-dealing aspects. Also, if you're not one for HP management, then you may not enjoy her playstyle as much. Either way, she certainly makes a big splash by having a kit that's currently one of a kind. But what do you think of Furina? Let me know down in the comments, especially if you've already tried her out. If this video helped you out, don't forget to leave a like, consider subscribing to my channel if you haven't already, and I will see you all soon. Take care!
Being too popular can be such a hassle. Who knew the people would adore me so much?